Hello everybody, hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to be building a calendar in JavaFX without using Scene Builder. If you're unsure of how to build a new JavaFX project, please look in my other videos for a tutorial on how to do so. To give you a rough explanation of how the code will work, we're going to create a parent layout container, which is the VBox, named Calendar UI, that will wrap both the title bar and the date grid. So we're going to write VBox calendar UI equals get calendar. This method is what we will use to return everything that we've made inside of calendar UI. Next, we're going to initialize a new JavaFX scene object using calendar UI as the root node. This is going to contain all the visual components of the calendar. Next, we're going to create a scene object from the scene class. The capital scene is the class and the lowercase scene is the object. You can rename the lowercase scene anything you like depending on your personal preferences. Now we're going to create a new instance of the scene class using the new keyword. This sets calendar UI as the root node and specifies the scene's width as 600 pixels and the height as 400 pixels. You can rearrange this depending on how big or small you want your calendar to be. To set a title for our application, we need to write primary stage dot set title, and this is how we can create any title we want using quotation marks. To finalize the setup of our JavaFX application, we need to tell it which scene to show in the main application window. And lastly, to make the scene actually visible when we run the application, we need to tell Java to show the scene. To build and return the full calendar layout as a VBox, we need to write all of our code inside of the getCalendar method. The first bit of code we're going to write is using Java's built-in method localDate to be able to retrieve the year, month, and day from our computer system. This line creates a local date object called today and sets it to the current date based on the system clock. Now that we've stored the current date labeled as the object today, we can extract the current year from the object today using the getYear method. We can repeat the same process to get the month. We've set both of the year and month as integers because they are both numerical, as in 2025 and 1 through 12. In the next line of code, we're going to create a year-month object. The point of this is when referring to a physical calendar, there's 12 pages and not just one page. This is going to help us later as each month begins on a different day and we may need to offset the first day of the month depending on the start of the week. The next line of code is going to convert year month into a full complete first day of the month. Previously year month would be, for example, July 2025. Now year month will say 01 July 2025. This is another requirement needed in case we need to offset the first day of the month depending on the first day of the week. This last line of code gets the total number of days in the current month and stores it as an integer. Length of month automatically handles leap years for February and returns the correct number of days in the month. This next line of code checks which weekday the first day of the month currently lands on. It returns a day of week enum used to correctly place day 1 on the calendar grid. If you have any red underlines, you may need to add an import for JavaFX to work correctly. Make sure you're using correct imports that say FX. Next line converts the weekday we got earlier into a numerical index for positioning on the grid. GetValue returns a number 1 as in Monday to 7 for Sunday based on the ISO standard. Since our calendars start with Sunday in column 0, we need to apply a modulus operation to shift the Sunday from position 7 to position 0. This gives us a value from 0 to 6 that tells us which column the first day of the month should go in.
So now I'm going to be creating a VBox to store the calendar itself. In this VBox, we're going to do some designs, such as choosing a color for the background, rounding the corners, and determining the sides of the spacing. If you look to the original diagram that I created, this is the grid pane. The grid pane will be held inside this VBox, and this is just to add spacing between the title bar and the calendar grid itself. Setting the padding with a size of 10 is just going to make sure that there's always a little bit of space between each of the elements inside the calendar.
Now I'm going to style the calendar a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is set a background color of orange, and then I'm going to curve the corners of the calendar a little bit so that it doesn't look exactly like a rectangle. If you got any errors here like I did, you may also need to make some imports. Just make sure you're only using the JavaFX imports. Now we're going to add a label to the top of the calendar. This label is going to read the month and the year. I'm going to name it title just so I can reference it easier later. Inside the constructor, we pass the text that we want to display. yearmonth.getMonth.toString gets us the current month from the yearMonth object and converts it into a string, like January or March. Now we're going to add a space between our month and the year and use our year object to retrieve the year. Now I'm just going to style the heading a little bit by making the font size 24 points and the font weight bold. Now that we've created our title, we want to be able to center it. I'm going to do this using an HBox. Now we're going to create a grid pane to hold each individual box for each day of the month. We're going to set the lines to visible so that we can actually see the lines. Now, to actually create the grid, we want equally spaced boxes for 7 days of the week and 4 weeks per month, roughly. I'm going to use the built-in JavaFX class column constraints to do this. For this, I'm going to use a for loop, and it's going to run 7 times from 0 to 6. Now I'm going to create a new column rule object to be able to add the columns to the grid. Now we're going to add the spacing for each of the columns. The for loop runs 7 times, and we're going to make sure each column takes up exactly 1/7 of the total width. This line here is going to add the call object that we created earlier to the grid pane. Now we're going to do the exact same thing, but this time we're going to use the row constraints class. The reason why we want 7 rows is the first one is going to be for the days of the week, and the rest are just to ensure that in case the month is not exactly perfect, there's enough room to hold each day. Next, we're going to create a string array that contains each day of the week. Now, we're going to write a for loop that goes from 0 to 6, so 7 times total, and they're going to put the days of the week from the array into each of the 7 columns created. Since the first of the month doesn't always start on a Sunday, we need to make sure that we can leave some spaces between the first day of the month and the entire left side of the calendar if we need to. What this is going to do is link the day label object we created earlier with the string array that we have now. Later on, we're going to make a way to offset the first day of the month depending on which is the first day of the week of that month. Again, this part is optional, but I'm just going to style the day label. Now I'm going to have each day of the week centered at their respective square. And I'm going to place each day of the week starting from column 0 all the way to column 6. Int current day equals a 1 is a counter that starts on day 1 of the month. It will increase each box by 1. This for loop, we're going to build the grid of days, and it's going to skip the empty spots before the first day of the month. The for loop is going to start at row 1 because row 0 was taken up by the days of the month. It's going to continue filling up until it's at least row 6 and there's still available rows to be filled up. Although earlier we made the rows and the columns, we need to actually fill those cells. This inner loop is going to do exactly that. This next line of code is going to check if we are in row 1 and if we are in a cell that comes before the first day of the month. If this is true, we're going to leave those cells empty. This line here is going to add those empty labels into the correct cells until the first day of the month lines up with the current weekday. Continue just means we're going to skip the rest of this loop cycle and move on to the next column. Now if the current day is larger than the amount of days in a month, we're going to stop because there's no need to fill in any more cells. Next, we're going to create a new label called day, and what it's going to do is going to retrieve the value of the current day and add that number to each of the cells. In this part here, since it's a FX application, some users may want to resize their screens. What this is going to do is allow the numbers to become as large as possible depending on the size and the stretching of the screen. This line here is going to position the number of each month to the top left of each cell. And this here is just going to style each number of the month and make it black, bold text, and a size of 20. This line here is going to check if the current date integer we created earlier is the actual current day of the month based on the information from our computer. If this comes back as true, then the border will be blue, the text will be bold, the size will be 20, and it's going to fill the cell as blue. This is just to indicate that today is the current day of the month. And it's just going to continue adding each day by one until it's finished. This line here adds the day label to the grid pane at the specified column and the row. As I mentioned before, some users may want to resize their screen. This line here tells the parent VBox that the grid should expand and take up any available vertical space as possible. Priority.always gives it the max growth priority. This line here will add the title bar and the grid of days into the parent VBox and stack them vertically. Return calendar VBox will return the fully constructed VBox that now contains the calendar UI. This way, when we run our code, we'll actually be able to see the calendar. One thing to change is now when we run our code as a Java application, we will see our full calendar. As we resize, we see that the cells and the numbers also increase in size. At the time of this recording, the current date is July 15th, and that is highlighted in blue. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.